1, 2, 3, 4.
Tamara, you got any weekend plans? What you got planned for Saturday, tomorrow?
Probably some kayaking, but I'm not 100% sure yet. I think it's supposed to rain, so we'll see.
Yeah. Nice. What about you, Miss Lori?
As far as the weekend plans, nothing really. I need to go and put a lockbox on a home. That'll be coming to the market soon. But outside of that, just literally, I have planned on cleaning my garage, so nothing spectacular.
Oh, fall, just like the
Dreading it.
spring cleaning and fall.
Right. Did you guys do anything like great last weekend with, Labor Day holiday, extra long weekend? I feel like it went by so
Oh yeah,
so fast. That we actually had, my family had a family reunion down in
Nice.
South Carolina, and when I tell you it was hot, it was like on a whole nother level. It was actually at down off of Fort Jackson at one of their facilities, and as I was walking up, I saw windows up, and I'm like, "What's going on? Why are the windows up?"
Yeah.
The air was broken.
Oh no!
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was my weekend.
Yeah.
That was my weekend.
Well, I drew past Fort Jackson on the way down to Charleston last weekend. We had, I don't really get into fantasy football, but we had like I'm in like a family league over Labor Day weekend, and that was in Charleston. So It was family fantasy draft for the football thing.
How about you, Tamara? Anything interesting for the Labor Day holiday?
Oh, I know it went by so fast. We had 2 birthdays to celebrate, and I did go kayaking in the pouring rain. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't supposed to be raining. It wasn't raining when I went out, but I got drenched. But it's kayaking.
Awesome. All right. So today, what we are doing, we are coming together to just break up the day as everyone starts to wind down for their weekend, right? It's been a short week, but for me, it still feels like it's been a long week. and once Friday rolls around, it's just like once lunchtime hits, it's like, okay, just a couple more hours, That is if you can't sneak out a little bit early, if you are like in corporate America. But as we are beginning to wind down for the weekend, we just want to bring you guys some information, some burning questions that have come our way, some hot topics that have fell into our inbox, or we've been asked about, or we hear often. So I'm so thankful that I have both Michael, who has tons of experience in the mortgage field. He is with Movement Bank, and Tamara, as she said, she is with Knipp Law. So she's going to give us some legalities around closings, and it's going to be not just for buyers but sellers also. Some of the information that we're going to cover. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's go ahead and dive in. I think the biggest thing that I'd like to talk about is how scammers nowadays, I just don't get it. I feel like if they're so smart at how they're able to do different things, um, it just feels like if they were to use that for good, the world would be such a better place, right? But that's not the case.
So
And
true.
we do have scammers every day popping up, whether it's, taking down, homeowners' pictures and posting it as if they are, selling a home only to scam, individuals out of money. If they're saying, hey, I'm renting this
Yeah.
place, and they're not the owners of the home, they will scam people out of money that way. As well as deposits if they're saying that, they are selling the home. But as it relates to you, Tamara, um, give us a little bit of background on scams and fraud. I know that we are charged, myself as a realtor, we say, hey, when you are going to a closing and you have cash that you need to bring to the closing table to secure that transaction, to finalize it, it's not just, $20, $30 here. It's a substantial amount of money that you could potentially be out of if it fell into the wrong hands. So we do give a disclaimer, we give a warning, and we basically say, hey, if you receive an email specifically from me with wiring instructions to the closing attorney's office, don't trust it.
Right.
Because I will not send that information to you. But can you elaborate on, what you've seen as an attorney come across, like your desk as far as, scams and fraud is related?
Absolutely. So wire fraud is a really big issue in our industry, and we are talking about people's life savings. Typically, how we see this is in the form of spoofing, where the bad actor will say has created an email account that maybe the display name says Tamara Cornish, but you actually look at the email address and it's not Tamara Cornish. Or the display name might be Lori Randolph, but it's not Lori Randolph. So you've got to pay close attention to those things. And you always want to make sure you are communicating with a law firm when they're sending those wiring instructions to you. How we send our wiring instructions is through a secure email portal. And that, of course, is not 100% foolproof, but it's much harder for a criminal to target that email versus an unsecured email. And we still have folks, even though we've sent it through an unsecured email, call our office to confirm those wiring instructions. We have our main line set up so that people can simply opt for a certain number on our menu and get straight to a team that's dedicated to confirming wiring instructions so that folks aren't waiting at the bank to get those confirmed. But it is so important that you know who you're talking to when it comes to this piece, because it's happening every day where folks are losing their life savings because they think they're wiring funds to a law firm when really they got the wiring instructions from someone who was posing as their loan officer or their agent or from a paralegal at the law firm. Once you examine that email, you can see it's not really from those folks. And I think with such busy lives that we have, it's easy to make that mistake. So it's so important to slow down and pay close attention to that. If you are getting a change in wiring instructions, say you received them from the paralegal a week before closing, and then you get a new set of wiring instructions, always question that, because that's a big red flag. We don't change our wiring instructions. and receiving them unsecurely in an email is also a big red flag. It's really important to, if you're getting an email from someone through this manner, such as an unsecure email, if they've got a phone number in that email, don't call that phone number. Call that person directly with a known number that you've received in the past or that's published online. In our case, it would be our main line. That would be the best number to call. And we would get you a response as quickly as possible as to whether or not that was a legitimate email.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think just to, it's so insightful. I think what's really important here, and the key takeaways from my side, is twofold. The first is we live in like that rush society, right? Like hurry up, and so taking the time to slow down, I think, can really solve the majority of case when it comes to fraud. The other thing is that whenever you're dealing with, you need to be really cognizant of if they're manipulating your emotions, right? Or if they're kind of applying that pressure, then listen to those cues inside yourself. And if you start to feel that, just take a breath, hang up the call, and call directly to the real estate attorney's office. Those are the advice I give, especially first-time home buyers who they don't know. They don't know what to take a breath, to slow down. It's this isn't 911's going to end up in the hospital. We just need to be really cautious and cognizant of what we're doing here.
And that's a great point. If there's some urgency behind the email that is, you must do this immediately, that's a concern. Yes, we want you to send your wire before closing so we can get things moving smoothly the day of closing. So we do at least say, hey, please try to send this prior to closing, but you're not going to see any crazy language in our email saying you must send this immediately, drop what you're doing. And you will see that from some of the criminal actors that they've got a tremendous amount of urgency to their email and repeatedly follow up with you to see if you've sent it yet. Because as soon as it hits their US bank account, it's going offshore.
Yeah.
And once it goes offshore, the likelihood of getting that back is very low.
Yeah.
I did have a follow-up. I had a follow-up question. So let's say in fraud is committed, occurs, I should say. What is the next steps that happens in a situation when fraud actually does happen and something horrible like?
Well, in that situation, if say we have a buyer send funds to the wrong party, we encourage the buyer to contact the police because they will need to get involved as quickly as possible. You certainly want to get a hold of the bank. Hopefully, whatever bank they send it to is a good, reputable bank that will recognize, hey, this isn't Knipp Law Firm. This isn't their bank account. I should return this money. But not all banks do that. So, and that's why this is possible. So it's important that they engage the authorities right away, and that includes the FBI. So they get involved pretty quickly once you contact them.
I believe the FBI has a wire fraud hotline even. So
they do.
It's something that.
And I believe they also have an email address on their website as well.
Yeah. Now, Tamara, have you guys there at Knipp Law, have you experienced that like more recently over, as years go on?
Not recently. It's been some time since one of our buyers was targeted. A lot of times we catch it before anything bad happens because our buyers contact us and we say, hey, that wasn't us. Or the agent will get involved and be like, hey, I don't think this is Knipp Law. We've been fortunate in that sense. But in years past, we have had a situation where the buyer, unfortunately, did not contact us and sent the funds to the wrong place. My understanding is that the authorities got involved quick enough to stop it from going overseas.
Yeah.
But that has to happen so fast.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's super, super scary. Super scary.
It is. So this is your life savings. You've got to slow down and make sure you know who you're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make sure
Absolutely.
you're communicating and familiar with your lender, with your real closing attorney. Everybody's on the same page. That's the key thing here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So don't make the transaction without speaking with someone. So even though you get it from, the email address from the law office, always make sure to follow up either with your realtor or the paralegal that you've been working with at the attorney's office to make sure that that information is actual. Yeah, it's just not
and more
losing. Yeah.
And then just to highlight as well, more and more organizations and these secure messaging centers that was mentioned earlier as well, right? So maybe you access that, you get those initial documents, and you accept the invitation from the attorney back regularly in there, because that's where they're working. That's where the information is flowing back and forth. Email that's coming from an outside of that secure messaging center, your antenna should be, what is this? And double check, call the attorney's office or call your realtor that it's not, something else.
Yeah.
Right. When you're sending an unsecure email, it's the equivalent of a postcard, right? Like whatever you write on that postcard, if somebody gets it, they can see what you wrote. An unsecure email is the same thing, and those emails hit multiple servers before it gets to the person you intend for it to get to, and that's why secure email is so important, because it's locked down. It's much harder for someone to crack. They can still do it, but it's a tremendous amount of work for them to do it, because they actually have to get into your system and act as you to open that email, right? And that's more work. Not that it can't be done, and that's why it's so important to maintain contact and talk to people.
Okay. Well, I love that postcard analogy. I've got to start using that. I never thought about it, but when you think about it, it really is. So, so cool beans. So another question that I've been asked is pertaining to, it's a document that each transaction starts out with, whether you're a homeowner selling your home or a buyer going in to close on a brand new home. The paralegals, they send those out, and it's called like a seller info sheet or a buyer info sheet. Tell me a little bit about why is it so important, and why is it so important to get that back to you guys as quickly as possible? Because I think sometimes it's like once a contract goes under a contract goes under, it's like, okay, and the race is off.
Right.
Go. And
it's exciting time, right?
Right. But it's like you gotta move really, really quickly. And this form is definitely one that, I'm always pressing my clients to, hey, I will fill out as much as I can for you, but everything else I need for you to get it back to me like ASAP, like yesterday.
Right. Yeah. So this information is key for us moving forward with the closing. There's a number of details we need to know for both sellers and buyers in order to correctly prepare the documents. We certainly don't want to find out at the closing table when we get a driver's license that, hey, the information on the contract, their name was spelled wrong. We put it into our system wrong. The documents generated wrong. So we try and get all of that clarified up front. because nobody wants to sit at the closing table and wait for us to create new documents, right?
Yeah.
That's a big issue for the lender because they have to get their documents updated too if it's incorrect. Additionally, we need information from sellers related to whether there's a tenant on the property, whether there's an HOA, any loan payoffs, manufactured homes, so that we can start the process of clearing title for those issues. Granted, we're going to find that when we do our title search, but if we can get that information in advance of completing a title search, we can start ordering those payoffs, ordering those HOAs. Some of the HOAs will charge rush fees if we're ordering it right before closing. So that's why we want that seller info sheet back in advance so there aren't any rush fees that the seller will have to pay. It's also an opportunity for the buyer to have a better understanding of what they're going to have to pay once they own that property. And then, of course, loan payoffs. Some lenders might take 6 days to get that back to us after we've requested it. I think there's a couple that might take 10 days. So that's not something we want to order a couple days before closing because we have to have that information in order to close. Part of our obligation under the contract, the seller's obligation is to convey clear title. Our obligation as settlement agent is to make sure we've cleared title. And the lender most definitely wants us to clear title. So we've got to have correct payoffs at closing. We've got to have that HOA resale demand. We need to know if there are any tenants on the property because that impacts title. So it really helps us get moving to make sure those issues are resolved and we're not rushing 2 days before closing to try and clear these things. Because a lot of times, finding out there's a manufactured home 2 weeks before closing and that title hasn't been retired, that can take a long time to resolve.
Right.
So we want to know that in advance so we can warn everybody and say, hey, this is what has to happen and this is the process. Everyone has the expectations, they can prepare for that. If we're doing that a couple days before closing, it's hard on everyone and it creates a lot of problems.
Yeah, and that's like another a topic for another session when we're talking about the process to rectify a mobile home. Because I do have a lot of questions about that come up regularly. But Michael, for you, a question when we're talking about getting to the closing table. Real quickly, can you kind of sum up what it takes to get an actual clear to close, which kind of triggers that final statement to go over to the attorney's office in order to get that tally out for either the buyer or the seller to know what they're either going to walk away with or what they need to bring to closing?
Sure. Yeah. So typically, once the agreement has been made between the buyers and the sellers to purchase a home, within a couple of days of that happening, that's when we're connecting with the. We're going to be asking them, hey, please order title. We need a title search done. Get the ball rolling on all those items that were mentioned earlier. So right from the get-go with the attorney, once, fast forward past the loan process, which I should mention about that today, Lori.
Yep.
But once we get to the end, clear to close. So that just means that everything's done. The mortgage, everything looks fantastic. We're good there. Now we're clear to close. We're really high-fiving the lender, the realtor, and the buyer says, yes, we're done. You're not done. You got plenty more to do. And you're going to become best friends with, there we go. And so it's in that time where the closing team, we have they call it a closer that would communicate with the attorney's office, and they're all that kind of like putting the numbers together. I like where they use about it like a teeter-totter. There's some numbers over here with the lender. There's some numbers over here with the attorney. Invoices for different inspections over here. Lenders done this, but they're kind of like this. And so what they're doing is they're working together to balance that fund disclosure. And when we're balanced, that's the really, really important numbers. Mortgage lender should be going over with you prior to closing, so you're familiar with. And that's your closing attorney should be going over with you at the closing table as well. In a nutshell, once that clear to close happens, and that timeline can range. It could be a scheduled closing date. It could be 2 weeks. It could be a couple days. It could be the day off. But within that timeline, you're going to become best friends with that closing attorney, and you're going to get those documents. You're going to meet with them, and then of course close, and then.
Yeah, listen, those are like my top favorite 3 words in a sentence: clear to close. And the sooner I can get it, the better, because I have had situations where I have not received a clear to close until the day of, and everyone's on pins and needles. So that is a very intricate process in itself, and that is probably a topic that we can cover on a whole nother session. But we're up on the 1 o'clock hour. So
already.
I know. I want to be mindful of that. But before we leave, one burning question that I want to ask, Tamara, can you kind of give a really quick summary of what the final step of the process looks like, and when buyers can legally receive the keys to their home? Because they think they come in, they sign the paper, and automatically they get the keys. Right. But legally, that is not the case.
Right. So I'll try and do an abbreviated version of this. So in North Carolina, the property is not legally yours until it's been recorded, meaning the deed. So it's important to understand the recording process takes some time. After the parties have signed the paperwork, we have to update title to confirm there are no new liens on the property. Additionally, we have to adhere to any lender instructions as to getting approval to record. That in itself can take time depending on the lender. Some lenders might not have a long list of instructions for us, and we can record pretty quickly. Others, it could take 4 hours for them to approve what has been done and give us that approval so that we can then prepare for recording. An additional piece to this is making sure we've got all the money in our trust account from both buyer and lender in order to record. We can't record prior to having all the funds in our trust. And then after submission for recording, this takes time too. So we're going to submit electronically in most cases. However, depending on the county you're dealing with, Mecklenburg County is a great example of this. Mecklenburg County at the end of the month, they're getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of submissions for that day, and they've only got so many employees processing those submissions. So what might take an hour to process on a Tuesday at the beginning of the month could take 4 hours to process. So it's really important to understand that you shouldn't have your painter or your moving truck in the driveway right after you've signed the documents. You need to have some buffer scheduled in there before you start having contractors show up, because sometimes if you close in the afternoon, it might not record until the next business day. Now, you could, at the outset of the transaction, negotiate with the sellers to get keys prior to closing, but there's certain steps to that, right? Mm-hmm. And the sellers aren't required to do that. So it's important to think through that whole process before even negotiating that contract. Will you need access to that property immediately? And if that's the case, that's something you want to include in your offer.
Yeah.
Now, I had a follow-up question. I just want to say, I know we're out. It'd be great to hear from an attorney on this, because I hear buyers ask me this. What is recording a mortgage? Is recording with a camera? Recording a little microphone? What is the verbiage of recording a mortgage?
Good point. So we take this for granted, don't we? So recordation means we have recorded the documents with the county. So it's in the public records for anyone to get online and see that you now own that property, that you have a loan against that property, that some particular lender has an interest in that property because they gave you money. That's what recording actually is.
And that's important, guys, because recording means you own the house. Once it's recorded, it's yours. You own that home now. So I thought that was an important point, because I have heard that from buyers ask me and wanted to hear it from an expert.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, I feel like the time really just flew. We could have talked about so many other things, but again, I don't want to have like a platform where we're taking an hour. It's literally just hop in, we're chatting, we're winding down, and we're getting some questions answered and just highlighting over some hot topics. So again, thank you guys so much for joining me today with our work week wind down session. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that you guys have a great weekend.
You too, and thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. You guys take care.